let's get to Scott Suravel, who just dropped a bill to basically make talking on the phone in Virginia hands-free only. Explain.
Yeah, so I came to this issue about 5 years ago. I had a family came to me who's 18-year-old who was working at a Jack in the Box or something out in Loudon, driving his car home, as most kids that age are, didn't have a lot of money, ran out of gas driving home within about a mile of his house. And he was turned on his blinkers, was pushing his car off of Route 7. And he got struck from behind by another guy who never braked and had 1,000 feet of straight, clear road right in front of him with no cars in front of him, hit him at full speed. And
he died.
Killed him instantly.
Oh, my goodness.
And when they pulled the guy's phone, he'd been texting his ex-wife after dropping off the kids for a custody exchange the entire way down the road. And the text stopped right when the collision happened. And then when he went to trial, because of the way we had the law drafted, back then texting while driving was a secondary offense. A police officer couldn't pull you over for it. They charged him with reckless driving, and the judge had to acquit him and get into the legalities of it. But it was really disappointing to the family, disturbing to a lot of legislators. And at that point, Delegate Ben Klein, who was the chairman of the committee, who had been blocking making texting while driving a primary offense, called me up when he saw I had some involvement in the case. And he and I talked, and we partnered together on making texting while driving a primary offense in Virginia. That's so you can be pulled over for it. Before it was like a seatbelt violation. They could see it, but they couldn't stop you for it. They can only charge you if they got you for something else like speeding. So anyways, back then we made texting while driving a primary offense. However, I always thought that I was never satisfied with that law. The biggest problem with it right now is that it's completely unenforceable. When the police stop somebody, they can't tell whether you're dialing a phone number or doing something that's not covered by the law. The law only makes it illegal today to enter text or numbers for purposes of communication. So it's perfectly legal to drive your car while playing Angry Birds, or drive your car while chasing Pokemon, or change music or whatever with that phone in your hand. And if you're doing any of that kind of behavior, you can't be charged. So the police have not been charging a lot of people because the only way to convict anybody is if they confess to it as soon as they stop them. If the cop says...
Right, because you can have your phone in your hand, but you could be saying I was playing a game, I was dialing a number, I was
just looking at it, I was browsing the internet, I was clicking on a link. That's all legal behavior. But the only way they get you if you say, yeah, I was texting, I'm sorry.
So they can't legally say, give me the phone so I can check it.
No. And actually, the U.S. Supreme Court has a case under consideration right now to decide when and how the government can seize your phone and how far they can get into it and all that kind of stuff. But in any event, the law right now is completely unenforceable. You know, in this behavior, it's extremely dangerous.
Yes.
The Virginia Tech did a study of this, and they found that the average text takes your eyes off the road for 4 seconds, and at 60 miles an hour, that's 88 feet a second. 90 times 4 is 360 feet. That's a football field you're going with your eyes closed if you're making a text on average, and it's completely dangerous behavior. And so last year, I put in legislation for hands-free that would bring us into compliance with 16 other states, including D.C. and Maryland, that are doing it. The bill died by one vote in a Senate in the Senate Transportation Committee. It died on a tie vote in the House Courts Committee. I think we have real momentum to get it passed. It was an interesting issue to me because I got emails and calls from people all around the state who are very upset and wanted to do something about it. I mean, anybody who drives on an interstate in the state, all you got to do is look to your left or your right, and you can sit there and count the number of people that are staring at their phones while they're driving, especially when you're in heavy congestion. And a lot of people are really upset about it, want to do something about it. I think I got bipartisan support from people all over the state. A lot of people told me, in the very rural parts of the state, a lot of conservatives called me and said, tell me what to do, and I'm hoping we get momentum on it this year.
Look, I think it's the right thing, and I was telling Senator Serval, I got stopped yesterday or 2 days ago. As soon as I got to D.C., I got stopped. I was at a light, and I was talking on my phone. I was not hands-free. I was just talking on it. And red lights go behind me. D.C. police, I get stopped, and they make me pull over. And I'm like, what did I do? Right? Thinking to myself, I didn't do anything. And I'm thinking, is my tag not on or something? I'm like, what did I do, officer? And he said, when you come to the district, you're in a hands-free environment. So either you get your ass back to Virginia or you got to get your hand out. And he said, it's $200 fine. And I'm like, oh, I didn't know. And he's like, well, you should know, but I'll give you a warning. So I skated out of it. But it kind of hit me that probably makes sense because I don't know how many times I've been in traffic and you see people texting or whatever they're doing, it doesn't seem like it's a particularly good idea.
Right, and the law says you can use the phone. You just have to use it in hands-free modes. You either have to have a Bluetooth headset or a wired headset, or you have to use the Bluetooth system on your factory-installed equipment. The law makes clear that it's totally legal to use any factory-installed equipment on your vehicle, so it doesn't interfere with your ability to use your navigation system or your car radio or anything like that. But I use it all the time. Like I'll hit. All you got to do is say, "Okay, Google." Your phone wakes up. If you got an Android, "Okay, Google, call home, call work, call Ben Tribbett, whatever," and it'll do it for you. You just can't be putting have your eyes on the thing, having your hand looking at it, so you're not paying attention to what you're doing while you're driving. Because interestingly, the number of car accidents and injuries, actually the number of injuries and deaths in the United States in cars are up in the last 2 years. For the first time in 50 years. We've been on a downward trajectory of cars getting safer, less people getting hurt, less people getting killed. And in the last 2 years, it started to go back up again. And a lot of people think it's because a lot of people are driving around with their phones in their hand and they're not paying attention. Okay,
let's transition here. Who is going to be the Speaker of the House in Virginia?
Wow.
That's my question.
I'd like to see what Vegas says about
what's
that.
Vegas?
There's no segue from hands-free to who's going to be the Speaker of the House, but I know, Ben, that you're involved.
But who's on first?
All this thing. Who's going to be while you're thinking about that, with a state senator, Democrat from Fairfax, Scott Zerville, with us, also noted longtime Democratic consultant Ben Tribbett. You can follow him on @NotLarrySabato. And by the way, you probably don't know this, but recent changes in the reverse mortgage industry make them even more attractive than ever. Now, to take advantage of this, call Cornerstone First Financial, 202-625-1221, 202-625-1221, or go to cornerstonefirst.com. That's cornerstonefirst.com, your one-stop shop mortgage solution, cornerstonefirst.com. Ben, who's going to be the Speaker of the House of Virginia?
Well, let's start with what's the makeup of the House of Delegates going to be.
Okay.
So there are currently 4 races that are headed to recount, 3 held by Republicans through the canvass process, 1 held by a Democrat. And what's expected is that the Democrat in Richmond, Dawn Adams, will win the recount. She's up about 300 some. And that 2 of the Republicans should win their recounts, Bob Thomas and Tim Hugo. Now, Bob Thomas has some side issues going on from Fredericksburg of whether people were given the right ballot or not, and that's a whole other issue that we can get to. But essentially what we're looking at is 50 Republicans, 49 Democrats, and the seat in the peninsula that will decide what the control of the House of Delegates is going to be. That one, David Yancey leads by 10 votes. I believe that at the end of the day, Shelley Simmons will win that seat based on what we've seen historically in recounts. Democratic voters are a little more creative in filling out their ballots. The optical scan machines don't always pick up on their votes as easily as the Republicans. That's why Democrats tend to pick up votes when you hand count the ballots. For example, someone may circle the candidates' names instead of fill in the bubble. Things like that can happen where you can discern voter intent. And John, I know there's probably some concern out there, probably some from your Republican listeners of what's this process like? Why do the results change? And just, for purposes of understanding this, in the Attorney General's recount in 2013, which was very contentious, almost no ballots went to the judges because the Democratic judge and the Republican judge who were overseeing it could actually agree on what the voter intent was. Very, very few did they look at and discern different intent. So I think there were
like 3 of them.
Yeah, they're very, very
like a couple thousand.
Right. It's usually very clear.
So you get both a Republican representative and a Democrat representative. And obviously, they take the ballots, they resubmit them through the machine, and any of those that got kicked out didn't get counted on election day. Then they're looked at manually.
Right.
And so, if you didn't fill in the box and you checked it,
kicked out on recount day.
Yeah, get kicked out on recount day. Yeah. That's what I meant. So, if you wanted Shelley Simons and you checked it, or you circled it, or you didn't fill it in properly,
you did something the machine didn't pick it up.
You filled out one, then you crossed it out and said, "No, I don't want that." And did another one. And
you
circled it and said, "I really want this one."
But it's obvious of who your choice was, both parties agree. Then that is counted.
Right.
Historically, that's favored the Democrats.
It favors the Democrats, I think, for a bunch of different reasons. And Part of that is demographically. But I think that the other piece of this is that, you know, people right now are just in this country feel like, you know, they feel like they're under attack in terms of their political views of, you know, conservatives. What I'm speaking of is, you know, this idea of, you know, they're being targeted, things are happening. I already seen conspiracy theories go out of, you know, Democrats are going to steal this election, they control the electoral boards. That's just not how this process works. It's a Republican judge and a Democratic judge. If they can't agree, it goes to a judge. By the way, the judge is actually appointed by Republicans because the General Assembly appoints all judges in Virginia. But it's not going to get to that point. So long story short, I believe Shelley Simmons will end up prevailing. Simons will end up prevailing, and that the House will be 50-50.
And then what happens?
Well, then there could be a challenge to the Fredericksburg result. I believe that's why the Republicans have asked for a recount in Richmond, even though Manoli LaPace is actually much further down than the other recounts that are going on. Because I think their intent is if the Democrats challenge Fredericksburg, they will challenge the results in Richmond to avoid having the challenge create a temporary advantage. The challenges are heard by the House of Delegates Privileges and Elections Committee before it gets to the floor. That committee is not reassembled until you elect a speaker who appoints a new committee. And so it would be the old committee of the House of Delegates, heavily Republican control, that would hear the challenge, but then they would refer it to the floor. I think that there's some procedural questions. Obviously, there's also a Republican clerk that whether or not if the committee kills the votes against the challenge, if it would even advance to the floor, if the clerk would even allow it to go to the floor.
You
whether
could have a federal lawsuit, you could have an injunction, you could have.
There's all sorts of things that can happen here, and I think that my guess is that at the end of the day, the Republicans will have some nominal control of the House of Delegates because they have all the mechanisms to create that, especially having the clerk and the committee structure from before until you elect a speaker. But what this could come down to, if it's a 50-50 House and the Republicans are unable to use those advantages to claim control early on, this could turn into a battle of who can hold their bladder the longest. You know, on the floor, if someone steps off the floor to go to the bathroom, that could be the deciding vote where someone has temporary control of the floor. We saw this, and it sounds funny, but we actually saw this in the Senate where Henry Marsh left the Senate a few years ago to go to a
Martin's inauguration.
No, I think he went to a Martin Luther King Day.
Yeah, no, he went to the Obama inauguration.
Inauguration.
On a Martin Luther King Day.
Right.
Right. That's exactly what it was.
Inauguration day.
No, he went to Obama's inauguration on the second inaugural day.
Are we sure? I thought he was going to an event for Martin Luther King Day. Anyway,
he went
to a thing and left the Senate, and the Republicans took the opportunity to ram through a redistricting bill while he was gone. This could be the same thing except even faster.
You could go to the bathroom and then they could.
Right. And so, you know, I mean, I'm not going to try to go delegate by delegate to do analysis of who's going to take the first bathroom break.
Right.
But, you know, I mean, that's what you really could be down to with control of the House of Delegates. I believe it will be decided before that because I think the Republicans will use the mechanisms they have now to ensure that they have some nominal control. I personally think that the Republicans would be smart to enter into a power sharing agreement with the Democrats, if only for.
What goes around comes around.
Well, I think that the reason it's smart for the Republicans is, you know, they're more likely in 2019 to have a majority than the Democrats are. We don't know what the environment will be in 2019, but we picked up a lot of seats this year. There's going to be a lot more vulnerable Democratic incumbents than Republican incumbents. Yep. And it's not like the Republicans can pass a bill on their own anyway because Ralph Northam's governor. So to me, it makes a lot of sense for them to say, we'll enter into a power sharing to look good politically.
Well, why wouldn't the governor,
and take control in 2 years?
Why wouldn't the governor just take one of these more long in the tooth Republicans in the House and give them a job in the administration? This game is played all the time. Jim Gilmore played it. You give him a job as Secretary of Administrative Services, or you pick something, you put him on the alcohol and tobacco system or whatever.
We got rid of ABC, by the way. We made it a board, and the guys on ABC.
All right, well, you give him a job, and then if they stay in it,
let me,
and then they get, and then their pension is 120,000. It's 100,000 instead of 10,000.
It can work, but
why wouldn't they do that? Why
here's the downside of it, and I'll use the Senate as the first example, and then we can talk about the House. So in the Senate, here are your options. You could appoint any of the Republican senators, but by appointing them, you're still going to have Republican control. You really have to appoint two because it's 21-19. And you have to pick up at least one. Otherwise, what's going to happen is you're going to have special elections and you might have temporary control, but the special elections will bring back new Republican members. So look in the districts where the Democrats could pick up. I don't believe Ralph Northam will appoint Dick Black to his administration. I don't see that. He's a seat that Democrats could pick up. Glenn Sternovit was just elected in Richmond.
I'm talking about the House, though.
Okay, but just using these as examples.
Right.
So they are people that you're not going to pick up a seat. So really the governor's left with like maybe Virginia Beach, but Virginia Beach is choppy whether or not the Democrats win or not. Ralph won it, but by this much, very little. House of Delegates is the same thing. There's not a lot of heavily Democratic seats that we didn't just pick up. So if you're going to create a special election, it could give you temporary control, but then you have to go win that special. And oh, by the way, if you don't win the special and you use the special to create temporary control Democratic, and then the Republicans suddenly have 50 seats again, they're going to kill everything for the next 2 years out of anger that you temporarily took control. So if the governor's doing it, he has to be successful at it. And there aren't a lot of logical places to make an appointment. Here's an example, John. Tim Hugo's race, very close to Northern Virginia this year. Let's say Tim Hugo is willing to join the administration. He's not. He doesn't need the money. But let's say he was. Tim Hugo's seat is the only seat in Northern Virginia that voted for Ken Cuccinelli in 2013. There was a wave this year that happened to it of why it was so close. In a special, we would not be favored, even with the same candidate, who I thought was a good candidate. We would not be favored to pick up that seat. And so this is very, very complicated for the governor. He's got to find the right spot with the right candidate and the right legislator willing to take the appointment. And, short of making Dick Black the Secretary of Health, which I don't think is going to have anyone really excited to put him in charge of the health department. I'm not sure where you're going to find someone who is an ideological fit and a political fit in this environment.
I think you explain that better than I've heard anyone explain it. So I want to thank Ben for that.